All right, well, I'm going to go ahead and introduce you and get started. It's time. People will pop on. I assume you would just like to go ahead and do your presentation. Would you like people to raise their hands for questions or wait till at the end of the presentation, or how would you like to do this?
Yeah, I think what we'll do is we'll go through our presentation, and then we have a fun little interactive activity, and then we'll be open for any questions after that because I'm sure people will have some questions that they want to ask.
Okay, perfect. Thank you all for being here. If you could please just mute your mic while Heloise is giving her presentation so there's no background noise. That'll make it easier for everybody to listen and understand what she's saying. I just want to introduce Heloise, who really needs no introduction in our community. Everybody knows her. Everybody who's anybody knows Heloise. She's a junior at Stanford University, majoring in bioengineering. She
Do you
became
hear
she
them?
became involved
Mhm.
in activism and research for FSHD
Okay,
after
mute
being
yourself.
diagnosed at 13 years old. After hearing presentations on the mechanisms of FSHD by some of her FSHD superheroes, she would like to pay that forward to the kids and teens living with FSHD today. And we appreciate her being here. She's also joined by her friend Alice. She's a sophomore studying bioengineering at Stanford as well. She got involved in FSHD research with Heloise through the IGEM over the past year and is excited to keep working on the project over the next months. And we thank you, ladies, very much for being here. And we look forward to your presentation. Again, if you could please mute your mics while she's giving her presentation, that will help everybody out. Thank you so much. And I hand it over to you, Heloise and Alice.
Yeah, thank you so much for introducing us, and thank you all for joining. We're really excited to talk to you guys today, and we're going to be telling you all about FSHD. And so, just a quick little overview of what our presentation today will look like is we'll start with some introductions, tell you a little bit more about ourselves, and then we'll dive right into an overview of what FSHD is more on the molecular side in terms that hopefully will help you kind of like wrap your heads um around what's going on in this disease. And this is really aimed more at a kind of like beginner friendly overview of FSHD. So hopefully by the end you'll have a bit of a better understanding. And then we'll talk also a little bit about ways that you can get involved as kids and teens and parents as well in making a difference for FSHD. And then we'll have a little bit of a pop quiz, but don't worry, we're not sending this to any teachers or parents or anything like that. It's just for fun, just to kind of see if any of what we'll talk about resonated with you. Um, so my name is Eloise, and I was born in Brussels, Belgium, but I now live in Florida with my family, and I am in California for college, so kind of all over the place. But I'm studying bioengineering here at Stanford on the path to research and medicine. So hoping to make my career into pioneering treatments for FSHD and other rare neuromuscular diseases, and that passion really comes from being diagnosed at age 13 with FSHD and um, becoming involved a few years later in activism and now research because I want to kind of do all I can to advance the day that a treatment comes.
And I'm Alice. I was born in the Bay Area and I go to school here, so I've lived here like my whole life. I'm also studying bioengineering and I hope to become a physician scientist. So, like Eloise, I'm super interested in medicine and research. And over the past summer, I got involved with Eloise, and we had like a team of eight people total. And we were working on an FSHD related project. So we were part of Stanford's iGEM team, and it stands for International Genetically Engineered Machine. It's basically like this competition where students that are in high school, college, and even graduate students from universities all across the world basically work on summer projects and then present them at a conference. And our iGEM team at Stanford was focused on developing a new treatment for FSHD.
Great. So kind of jumping right in, let's talk about FSHD. So you guys are the experts on what FSHD looks like from the clinical perspective. So I won't spend too much time on this slide, but just to give kind of a broad overview from this side of things, FSHD stands for facioscapulohumeral muscular dystrophy, which is definitely a bit of a mouthful. So very grateful for whoever invented the acronym FSHD. But it affects about 1 in 12,000 people. So it's a rare disease. But we actually believe that FSHD might be widely underdiagnosed because it affects every patient very differently, and it can be kind of hard to pinpoint in a clinical setting. And so it might not be quite as rare as we think. But what FSHD does is that it causes progressive weakening of skeletal muscle due to degradation of muscle fibers, which we'll kind of get into later on in the presentation. But it can cause a really wide range of symptoms. And recent studies have really shown that it affects every patient very differently, and it can almost impact any muscle in the body, which can make it kind of hard to study and understand better because each patient experiences such different variants of the disease, and that's something that's very characteristic. But thanks to emerging bioengineering technologies, we are able to better characterize the progression and the impacts of FSHD, which is really exciting. So now let's move on to the molecular side of things. And I just want to preface this by saying that FSHD is commonly characterized by scientists as one of the most complex molecular mechanisms of any genetic disease out there. So it can take a couple of tries to really wrap your head around what's going on here. And I know when I was first learning about FSHD, it was really confusing and scary to think about it. But by attending many presentations like this and getting involved myself, I've come to kind of understand what's going on and now work towards treating it. So let's start with the basics, the central dogma of biology, which you might have heard about a little bit in biology classes, or you might not. But essentially, your cells all have something called DNA, which is the code and the code for all of the building blocks of your body's functions. And that gets read and made into RNA, which is a very similar structure as DNA, but it's just a copy of it. And then that gets ultimately produced into proteins, which are the building blocks of all of your body's functions. And everything that your body does is done by proteins that come from RNA, that comes from DNA. So that's kind of the workflow in your body. But I know that this is already starting off with a lot of fancy acronyms and fancy names. So let's think about it in terms that might be a little bit easier to understand. So think of a library. And today we're going to be thinking about baking. So imagine that this library right here is the library of the Culinary Institute, and it has all of the cookbooks that you can possibly ever imagine, and it has all of the recipes that you could ever want to make. And so that represents your DNA. It has all of your genes that you could ever possibly need. But let's say we want to make gingerbread cookies. We can't take the whole cookbook from the library because, what if we lose it, or what if we get it dirty while baking? So instead, we would go into the library and handwrite a copy of the recipe, which is representing RNA. It's basically just like a little paper copy of the recipe, but it says the exact same thing as in the cookbook. Now, the protein is when we go home and we go in our kitchen and we bake our beautiful gingerbread cookies. And I know the holiday season is past, but it's never too late for some gingerbread cheer. So today we're going to be working with gingerbread cookies. And so this is kind of representing the workflow of your cells. You have your DNA library with all of the cookbooks you could possibly ever need. And then the RNA is essentially like a little copy, a handwritten copy of the recipe that you want to make. And then the protein is the finished product, the finished gingerbread cookie. But what happens when one of these steps goes wrong? And that instead of making a cheery, good old holiday gingerbread cookie, we make an evil gingerbread man. Well, that's kind of what happens in the case of FSHD. So kind of moving to the molecular side of things, FSHD is caused by expression of a gene called DUX4. And this gene DUX4 encodes for a protein with the same name of DUX4, which is represented by our evil gingerbread man. DUX4 should be off in healthy people, but unfortunately, in people with FSHD, the gene gets turned on because of a mutation. So let's go back to our library analogy. We have our DNA library, and it has a whole bunch of genes or cookbooks. And what I didn't mention in the previous slides is that um, some of these sections of the library are forbidden. You're not supposed to be able to go in there and read the recipes and make those recipes. So there are a bunch of locks on a lot of regions in your DNA, which is the case for people who don't have FSHD. DUX4 is located in this region called the D4Z4 region on your 4th chromosome. And it's a very repetitive region with all of these repeats that encode for DUX4. But because there are so many of those repeats and there are locks on them, your body can't read that recipe and can't make the toxic, evil DUX4 gingerbread man. However, in people with FSHD, there are one of two mutations in your genes. And so in one of the cases, you have fewer repeats, which cause the locks to be loose. And in the other case, there's a mutation in another gene that causes the locks to be loose as well. And so in the case of DUX4 and FSHD, the locks are all wonky. And instead of securing the cookbook in place, they get released, enabling the cookbook to be read, therefore a copy of the recipe to be produced, and ultimately the evil DUX4 gingerbread man to be baked. And so the evil gingerbread man DUX4 is at the root of FSHD. Now, once the evil gingerbread man DUX4 is baked, what does it actually do? Well, you can think of it like this. DUX4 goes back into the library of cookbooks, the DNA library, and it's going to scurry into all of the nooks and crannies and all of the forbidden sections that it's not allowed to go into. But because it's an evil gingerbread man, it doesn't care about those locks and that those regions are forbidden. So it's actually going to make a bunch of copies of all of those recipes that should be forbidden and shouldn't be produced. And those are going to get turned into a whole bunch of evil cookies and cakes and pastries that should have never been made in the first place. And those evil pastries are what are responsible for the muscle loss in FSHD. So to kind of recap all of that on the molecular side, DUX4 is at the root of FSHD, and a mutation in DUX4 causes it to be expressed even though that gene should be off. And once that gene is on and the toxic gingerbread cookie DUX4 is produced, it sets off a complex pathway that leads to death of muscle through a bunch of fancy terms like oxidative stress, cell death, inflammation, impaired transcript control. It basically just wreaks havoc throughout muscle cells and causes what you can see on the right here, which is some pictures of muscle that were taken by scientists. On the top, you can see healthy muscle from people without FSHD, where you can see the fibers are nice and even, they're all the same size. There aren't many gaps between all of the muscles. But then on the bottom, this is muscle from someone with FSHD, where there's some inflammation in between the muscles and all of the fibers are different sizes. And so that's kind of what's going on in FSHD. And hopefully that cooking analogy made sense, but now we'll move into kind of like a different side of things.
Yeah, so now that we have like the molecular picture of what's going on, we also wanted to talk about diagnosis and treatments for FSHD. So right now, the gold standard is genetic testing. So for example, the DNA library, that's every single person has their own library, and this can be tested to analyze what's going on in a person's genome. So common testing for FSHD includes analyzing like the number of D4Z4 repeats in a person's genetic code, or for mutations in SMCHD1, that other gene, to basically understand if a person may have FSHD or not. And then another powerful tool that is used for understanding what a person's muscles are like and how they change over time is MRI, or magnetic resonance imaging. And basically this enables basically looking at a person's muscle and how the tissue actually looks and how this changes over time. And this is a common tool in clinical trials. So when novel treatments are being tested, it can be used to see how that actually affects a person's muscles. And so right now, the current treatment for FSHD is symptomatic and supportive care. And so while there's no current treatment available yet, there is physical therapy and assistive devices, for example, braces, which support muscles and joints and basically support a person's muscle function. And so, like I mentioned, there's currently no cure, but there's actually a lot of exciting movement in the field because as we're finding out so much more about FSHD and having all these novel bioengineering tools, we can make a lot more progress in the therapeutic space. And so right now, there's actually a lot going on with in regards to all of the steps in the pathway that Heloise was mentioning. There's scientists targeting different areas of each molecular pathway and seeing how, like, when we perturb that and how we can actually reverse the changes that FSHD is causing. But this is super complicated, and we wanted to move back to the analogy to actually describe some of the things in a little bit more of a broader overview. So for the DNA library, for example, with the DUX4 gene, putting a lock on it, or basically preventing it from being expressed and having its function. And then with the RNA copy or the recipe, we can shred it up or basically destroy its presence. And then thirdly, with the protein or the evil gingerbread man, we can cut it up or in a way compete with it to basically stop it from carrying out its toxic function. So all these things are basically a level simplified, but they represent what scientists are working on in terms of the therapeutic space right now. And there are many ways for you to be involved yourself. For instance, with the FSHD Society, attending events and being involved in the community really goes a long way. You can organize fundraisers, even the smallest things like organizing fundraisers for example, baking, all going back to our cookie analogy, or something even more larger scale where you just raise money. And this goes a long way for FSHD research and outreach efforts. Being a part of community events to spread awareness about FSHD and also learning about the science yourself. Today, we just covered the tip of the iceberg about what FSHD is, and there's so much more to learn. Scientists themselves are still researching more about what FSHD actually is all about, but there's so much literature out there and so much to learn. Speaking up and raising awareness about your own experience also is extremely powerful, and most importantly, being hopeful for the future.
Yeah, so as Alex mentioned, there's so much going on in the space right now, and there's never been a time to be more hopeful than today, about the prospects for FSHD. I mean, there are literally hundreds of scientists across the world working on treatments right now, so that in the next coming years, there will be a cure available. And on top of that, you know, we have such a powerful community through the FSHD Society and different patients getting involved and stepping up to raise awareness and raise funds and raise hope for FSHD. So there's never been a time to be more hopeful.
Awesome. And with that, we wanted to jump right into our pop quiz. This is very, very low stakes, low pressure. It's just to recap on some of the stuff that we covered today. And so just do your best in answering the questions, and we're going to launch right into a Kahoot.
Have any of you guys ever used Kahoot before? Yeah? Okay. Give me a moment to pull it up. But we prepared a little Kahoot pop quiz for you guys. Let's see. All right. If you have a device available, that would be perfect. Can everyone see that?
You want them to go on to this Kahoot with their phones? Is that what you want them to do?
Yes, if you have a device like a phone or an iPad or a computer, you can go to www.kahoot.it and input that code. We'll just wait for everyone to join. And you don't have to join if you don't want to. It's just a fun optional activity.
Can you scroll that down for a second so we can scan the QR code?
Let me see. It's showing up on my screen. Let me see if it works like this. Can you see that?
Yeah.
Does that work? Okay. All right. Is anybody still waiting to join, or should we get started? All right. Let's get it rolling. If anybody has not played Kahoot before, there are just going to be some questions that pop up on the screen, and you can select the answer that you think on your device. And then after the timer runs out, we'll see what the right answer was. All right, let's go. Oh, perfect timing. First question.
Awesome.
All right.
Yeah, so DUX4, as Eloise was saying, is the name of the protein that causes FSHD.
All right. Next question. Nice. Go, Maggie. This is a bit of more of a trick question. We only talked about it briefly in the presentation, so it's okay if you didn't quite get it.
Yeah, awesome. So deletion of D4Z4 repeats is the primary genetic cause of FSHD type 1. Essentially, normally in healthy people, there are multiple, like hundreds of repeats of the D4Z4 region, but then in FSHD, there's a shortened number of these repeats.
Nice. Next question. This was also mentioned very briefly, but hint, think about the name of the toxic protein. So the D4Z4 repeats that we mentioned, DUX4 is enclosed within those repeats, and that whole complex is located on your 4th chromosome. All right. This is an ultra trick question.
Awesome. Yeah. So FSHD type 2, it accounts for about 5% of FSHD cases, but it's caused not by DUX4, but by mutation in SMCHD1. So this is another gene, but it causes the same downstream effects of FSHD.
Yeah, so I know this one is a little bit confusing because we always talk about DUX4 being the root cause of FSHD. And that is true. DUX4 is what causes the eventual muscle death in FSHD, but actually a mutation in SMCHD1 causes the expression of DUX4, which is kind of the trick to this one. But this accounts for FSHD type 2 cases, which accounts for about 5% of people diagnosed with FSHD. Allie's on a roll. Hint, we talked about people with FSHD1 having fewer repeats of D4Z4.
Awesome. Yeah, so I was talking about this earlier, but I didn't mention how many it was that people with FSHD1 have, but it's 1 to 10 repeats.
Which causes the DNA library locks to be a bit looser. All right. Okay, this is for a bonus point. We didn't talk about this in the presentation, but let's test your knowledge and see if any of you know this off the top of your head. So there are a lot of different inheritance patterns for genes, which we won't get too into the weeds on this because you could take whole classes for many years about genetics. But essentially, autosomal dominant inheritance patterns means that you only need to have the mutation on one of your 2 chromosome 4s for FSHD to be expressed. Think back to words that you've heard a lot.
Yes.
D's and 4s.
Awesome,
Nice.
everyone got it.
100%. Good job, everyone.
We didn't address this much, but essentially it's the D4Z4 region that's affected. And usually there's a lot of methylation, which basically covers up that library from being accessed to produce the DUX4 protein. But when there's no methylation, it's like the locks are removed. So that's a specific terminology.
We mentioned this very briefly during the presentation, but basically DUX4 is part of a family of proteins called transcription factors, which are responsible for activating other proteins that then cause the muscle death seen in FSHD. So it's called a transcription factor, but that's just kind of like a little naming convention. You guys are killing it.
Awesome. Yeah, so FSHD primarily is affecting skeletal muscle, but I guess the other options are
Yeah, and skeletal muscle is the muscle that causes all of your movement. So it's the muscles that are attached to your bones. All right. Guess who? So we talked a lot about FSHD affecting every patient very, very differently, and that is absolutely the case. So any of these symptoms, we just had to pick three for the Kahoot, but honestly, any symptom can be an early symptom of FSHD. And so it often starts with involvement in the face, but for other patients, like myself, it's more so in the arms or the legs. And so any symptom can be your first symptom of FSHD.
Awesome. Yeah, so the DNA was the library in our cookie analogy.
What about the DUX4 protein?
Awesome. Yes, it was the evil gingerbread cookie.
And that's the one that goes and wreaks havoc throughout the muscles. Okie dokie. Yeah,
Awesome.
we all know this one. So, scapular winging is a very common symptom in FSHD, and can be an early symptom as well for many people.
Awesome. Yes, everyone got it. But yeah, we mentioned genetic testing is the current gold standard.
Good.
Awesome. Yes. So MRI, it allows for actually imaging muscles like the softer tissue, whereas like other imaging methods are not able to do so as well.
Guess who is still in the lead, and we still don't know who it is. All right, 5 questions left. Yeah, so there's currently no treatment or cure for FSHD, but not yet. Soon to be, it'll be one of these other answers. But right now, patients can care for symptoms through physical therapy and braces and assistive devices, as Alice mentioned. But soon there will be a treatment available.
Awesome. Everyone got it. But yes, physical therapy, it's one of the supportive treatments, as Eloise was saying. Awesome. Yeah. So current experimental therapies are targeting DUX4 expression and activity, but as we were saying, there's a lot of different ways of approaching this. And so we know that FSHD is caused by DUX4. So trying to get to the root cause of what actually causes FSHD is current efforts focus.
Wow, Maggie, 10 answers in a row. You go, girl.
Awesome. Yes. So braces are used for supporting muscles and helping to improve function, but they don't like fix broken bones or have anything to do with eyesight or fighting off colds.
Yeah, and as a side note, through the FSHD Society, there have been actually a lot of really amazing presentations by physicians and physical therapists specializing in FSHD about braces and other assistive equipment. And so I would definitely recommend checking out those recordings. They're always posted on YouTube after the talk. So even if you miss them, you can always go back and watch if you're thinking about assistive equipment.
Last question.
Nice.
Awesome.
You all got it. There's so much that you can do as a scientist, as an activist, as a person keeping hope and holding a torch, because just by keeping hope, that's giving hope and motivation to the scientists that are working on treatments. And so that's kind of the takeaway message that we wanted you to come away from. So with that, let's unveil the scoreboard.
In third place, we have G. Second place is Maggie. And first place,
Spotlight.
guess
Guess
who?
who? Who was guess who?
So, hey, yeah, guess who is
Me.
Levin right there?
Nice.
And G is actually right here.
Wow. Power group.
So these are, our son Oscar was diagnosed almost a year ago, and Oscar has 8 siblings.
Wow.
Wow.
So,
Well, thank you guys for playing, and
thank
thank you to all of you for participating in the Kahoot. We hope that you learned something from the presentation and from the quiz. But now we know that you might have a lot of questions, so we'd love to answer any of them, and both on the science side or on the advocacy side. Yeah, let us know.
Hi guys. I wasn't here at the beginning of your talk, so I apologize for getting some of those answers wrong. But I had a question when you said about the MRI for kids. What age is appropriate to get MRIs for children, like for younger children? Do you guys have any idea of how common it is to and how soon they should start?
Yeah, so MRI is kind of the becoming a gold standard now in clinical trials and natural history studies, but um I haven't encountered much information about um in the context of early onset specifically and for kids. So I don't know if Ali, you have any more information.
Yeah, so with the new PEDS Move Plus study, I believe it's all the way down to age 5 for MRI. Is that correct, Debbie? I think it's age 5.
Yeah, yes, it's 5.
Okay, and then I saw Paul's question here as well. My daughter also has a FSHD too, so we're still learning a lot because she's so young and normally she wouldn't have found out this young, but we had a DNA test when she was younger because of some feeding issues and other things physically that she wasn't able to do at her age. So I think it's just the unknown that is so scary that you want to make sure that like you find those tests that get them in as young as you can, so then you can kind of see where they're like progressing and where we might need to focus more on. So that's why I ask.
Yeah, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was to say, you know, Frankie has FSHD too, and he found out very young, and he was one of the very first kids at his age group to be diagnosed with FSHD too at that age group. So we know how that is. So I don't know how old your child is, Jesse, but hang it in there. They're pushing for some cures and some awesome
Thank you.
individuals
She's
like
5.
Heloise. Yeah, that's it's a blessing to know those kind of things now, because there's things you can do and treatment plans you can get on now that significantly help with that. And FSHD2 is one of those hard ones to find, and I'm glad that they're starting to diagnose sooner. So get into the MOVE studies, get into whatever you can get involved in, because all of it, I think it all helps. The more people we get in touch with and the more we promote that it's out there and needs to be cured.
I
Yeah, I
just
second that. The new PEDS Plus study is coming online soon. They're piloting it and they're enrolling, and I think they're taking up to 80 kids. So I encourage you to get in contact with the nearest CTRN and get your kid enrolled. They'll learn a lot from it. It's the first time they've done MRI and some other things with children, so I think it's really promising.
Yeah,
I
she
just
just
wanted to add to it the importance of the testing though too, because to you know, get involved in many of these things and to be able to be in clinical trials and treatments, it'll be important to have the testing done. So just wanted to encourage everyone to consider getting kids tested.
Definitely. And to also answer the question in the chat about the treatments for FSHD2, most of the treatments in development right now are targeting DUX4 mRNA, so the recipe copies and the protein itself, or the evil gingerbread man. And both of those are expressed in both FSHD1 and FSHD2. And so the good thing is that treatments that are approaching the mRNA and protein level will be effective for FSHD1 and FSHD2. As far as clinical trials themselves, each trial kind of sets its own criteria, but in general, I believe that both FSHD1 and FSHD2 will be eligible, and there are a lot of efforts to get peds involved in trials as well in coming years. And so I can't speak like directly to each individual clinical trial, but in general, drugs targeting mRNA and protein stages will be effective for both FSHD1 and 2.
I just want to let everybody know, just in case, I know most folks are younger than this, but the Avidity trial for the next cohort has gone down to age 16. So it's age 16 to 70, in case you didn't know.
Any other questions?
Question for you, Heloise. Like, I know you guys are studying this, and doing some research. Are you researching for like, genetic stuff or mRNA, or what are you guys focusing on?
Yeah, so our efforts like that we started this past summer and that we hope to continue, we're mainly focused on developing a novel therapy for FSHD. So it's basically like a mechanism for how we would essentially overcome like the toxic proteins effects. And we're basically experimenting like, for example, in cells, seeing what happens if we insert like the DNA for what our proposed therapy is, and seeing what would happen and if that would alleviate the symptoms or like the activity that we see that relates to FSHD. And we have seen some pretty promising results. So
Yeah.
we're really excited to keep working on it.
To kind of put it in terms of the analogy, we're kind of intervening at the protein phase, or at the stage of the evil gingerbread man. And what we're doing is basically like releasing a bunch of good gingerbread people into the cells so that they'll go into the library and stop the evil gingerbread man from turning on all the genes that should be off. And so that's kind of the approach that we're taking. And as Alice mentioned, we've been seeing some pretty exciting results from preliminary experiments. So excited to see what the future holds.
I'm gonna make you promise right now, once you guys get that in the clinic, you're gonna open it up to kids. You promise?
That's the goal.
Wait,
Okay.
is that the only request you have, Allie?
Cure it and cure it for kids. How about
We want ambulatory too,
Yeah.
man.
Yeah, that's the goal. We're doing all that we can.
My daughter had a question about how it's passed on, and it's actually my husband is now, we're waiting on results from his blood test, but we've had a neurologist and a geneticist tell us, well, and even when we met with Dr. Jeffrey Statland in Kansas City, he said there are a number of cases that are spontaneous. So so far none of my other 8 children are showing any symptoms, but how is it passed on in general genetically from parents to children? I know it's complicated, but can you explain in a way they can understand?
Yeah, so typically people have 23 chromosomes, and there's 2 copies of each of those chromosomes, one from mom, one from dad. And so you have technically 46 chromosomes in total, but that's counting 2 copies of each individual one, which is basically a replicate of itself. So on chromosome 4, there's the region called D4Z4, which is present on both the first and second copy of that chromosome. And it's possible to have the mutation that causes FSHD on one of the chromosomes, but not the other. And so basically it's possible to get, in the case of FSHD that's passed down hereditary, it's possible to get one chromosome with FSHD from one parent and one chromosome without from the other parent. But because one chromosome has it, that's enough to cause the disease. Now, in the case of spontaneous mutation, during development, during early embryonic development, basically at the time of fertilization, both chromosomes typically don't have the mutation, but at some point during the early stages of development, one or more of the cells could develop a mutation that from that point keeps dividing and replicating that mutation, whereas the rest of the cells that didn't get the mutation don't have the FSHD causing mutation. And so I realize it's very hard to kind of explain without like drawing anything, but in most cases FSHD is passed down from parent to child, but in some cases, including I was actually a spontaneous mutation as well, a mutation during embryonic development can cause mosaicism, which means it's present in some but not all cells, because the mutation arose from one kind of rogue cell that got the mutation during development. So I don't know if that answers your question. I'm happy to talk about it more like over email afterwards, if you have more questions too.
No, that answers it. Thank you for explaining.
I was just wondering if there aren't other questions, if anyone would want to just go around and introduce themselves. Just thinking this is the first time we've really had a large group of kids, but I'm not sure if anyone would be interested in that.
Maggie, you can go first. You want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, you knew you could count on her, right?
Hi, I'm Maggie. I'm 15.
the sneeze just came from her little brother. So actually, we found out that so Maggie's dad has a spontaneous mutation, and we have 4 kids, and so Maggie and Peter both have FSHD.
And you guys live in Michigan, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, where it's really
Thank
cold.
you.
But here, I'm going to put in a plug. Right now, we're in Rochester because we're doing the MOVE study, and so I
You guys
highly
should all do it.
encourage you to move because so that like getting involved in things like that will help collect data and advocate. And so if you haven't checked into that sort of thing, please do.
We were talking about what you can do to help, and that's something you can do to help. So
Can I piggyback off her? Hi, Maggie. Hi, Debbie. My name is Jessie. Sorry, I just put the kids to bed, so hi. My daughter's name is Dylan. She's 5 years old, and we're in Indiana. And she got not clinically or clinically diagnosed with FSHD when she was about 2.5. But we do the MOVE study because she just turned 5. So we do the MOVE study next Tuesday at Nationwide in Columbus. So woohoo!
All right, I'll go next if that's okay. Oops. I have to. Wait. Okay, does that work now? I'm Isla and Sienna's mom. Isla's 8 and Sienna's 7. Yeah, we're from New Jersey. We've had our diagnosis for the last 3 years now. I was just wondering if maybe like Heloise could share why it's important for the kids to, advocate and speak up. The girls are always wondering why they don't see more kids at this stuff. So yeah, that's just a question if, why it's important for everyone to advocate for treatment.
yeah, definitely. As we kind of hinted at in the presentation, this is the most exciting time in the history of FSHD. We are making history here. There's so much activity going on in the space, and I was first diagnosed when I was 13 years old, and the first 2 years after my diagnosis were the hardest 2 years of my life. It it was a long process to accept the diagnosis, but when I was about 15, I decided to put my foot down and show FSHD that I was going to control it and not the other way around, and that I have FSHD, but it doesn't have me. And because of that, I decided to get involved and start fundraising and raising awareness in my local community, and then started getting more involved with the FSHD community on a larger scale. And um, getting involved has truly changed changed my life, because when you get involved in advocacy and activism for FSHD, no matter how small you think your action is, whether it's telling a friend about it and sharing your story with your friend, or hosting a bake sale at your school, or sharing your story on a blog post, you are shedding light on what FSHD is, and you're making other people living with the same disease feel heard, and so it's helping so many people, and it's encouraging researchers to keep coming to the lab every day and doing what they do. So not only that, but also something happens inside you when you start to be involved. You really prove to yourself that this thing is not going to control you and that you're in control. And I think that's been something really inspiring to me to get involved. And researchers talk a lot about, how a lot of times experiments fail, and more times than not, things don't go right in the lab, and it can be really frustrating. But hearing patient stories and being in patients' shoes just gives scientists so much inspiration to keep doing what they're doing. I don't know if Alice can
I totally
agree with that.
100%.
Because we talked with throughout the research process, we talked with a lot of patients as well. And I think everyone felt really energized by hearing those stories. And so there are 1,000,001 reasons to get involved. But that being said, take your time. If you feel like you're not quite ready yet, to take that step, you know, wait a little bit until you feel inside yourself that you're really ready to take back control. But once you have that feeling, don't let it go. It's, as Ali always says, it's time to get angry. It's time to put our feet down and show FSHD that we're in control and not the other way around. And if you ever want to have a more personal conversation, I'll put my email in the chat at the end too, and feel free to reach out. And I'm happy to talk more about my experience and help in any way that I can.
Thank you, Heloise. Really well said. And I think also just, you know, a lot of people with FSHD, they don't have symptoms until they're older. So sometimes people don't know that kids have it. So it's really important for kids to, like Heloise got involved when she was really young, to get their voices out there and let the world know that there are a lot of kids that do have this disease at a young age as well, so they can be represented as well. But very well said, Heloise. Thank you.
Hi, I wanted to introduce myself. My name is Sara. I'm from San Diego or California.
Sunny San Diego. Sorry.
It's not that sunny right now.
That's forbidden today.
California.
Hey, not to brag or anything, but no, but I was diagnosed when I was 8, and yeah, I'd say I'm new to this community, but my mom's always been the one doing research since I was diagnosed when I was little. But I think it's time I am more active.
And thank you, Louise, for your inspiration, and it's been wonderful to hear. It just seems like I learn something new every time I hear about FSH. It's a really difficult thing to explain to people and to family. So I do appreciate all of these conversations and information. And sometimes, like I told Ali at the conference, I just feel kind of ignorant about everything that's going on. So, and with everything, I have 3 kids, and so one is in college, and it's just kind of really difficult to get a grip of everything. But this is very informative and it's very helpful, and we appreciate it.
It is. I loved the evil gingerbread man from Shrek. That was amazing. Also, I really like Alice's earrings. Just
So
wanted
much. Thank you. She always has awesome jewelry.
love
All right,
them.
I have to respond to Gabby a little bit here, because Gabby, I was with you recently during an event, and I just want to encourage people to try not to be intimidated, because none of us parents knew anything. I mean, I'm a physical therapist. I did not know about FSHD before my daughter was diagnosed with it. And so we are all learning, and I just don't want people to be intimidated and not join us, because we can be more powerful if we work together and advocate and do this research together. And you did a great job. So no worries.
Thank you.
Does anybody else want to introduce themselves?
So we're the Shingle-Decker family, and when my son Oscar is 21, he's also a junior in college right now. We live in North Carolina, but he's in college in Kansas, and he's our second oldest of the 9. And we became, when we were getting tested last December, visiting a neurologist and doing all the testing, and then the last thing we waited on was the blood test from the genetic testing. And that came back on February 13th last year. And so it just confirmed what we kind of already knew. And it's been an interesting, new thing, of course. But I am just so grateful for the time that we live in, that I can plug in with other people, and online, from all over the world, and hear about the things that may be coming up for our son, and just be involved. And one of the things that I feel really grateful for recently is that when the new year came, I really didn't have any New Year's resolutions. And I thought, what could be something I do? And I just was thinking about it for days, and all of a sudden it just came to me. I'm like, FSHD advocacy. And I felt that I had reached that moment where now I'm okay to, after accepting, as much as I could at this point, because I know there will be new things to accept and new things to understand and new, living with this. But I felt like that was a turning point in my understanding of this from our son, that I'm like, okay, I'm ready. And I'm so glad, Debbie, that you said that. Don't be afraid, because I'm afraid I'm a little intimidated by what I don't know, but it's, we're all learning, right, along the way. So yeah, thank you for doing this. It was really good. And I'm happy to have, I told my kids we're doing this tonight so we can all learn.
I just wanted to mention too, because Oscar's, you said 21, that there's also a young adult group, if you're not aware.
Oh, awesome. I will let him know. Is that on Facebook or?
Allie?
So is Oscar the one that's affected?
Yeah, he's
Yeah.
my 21
Yeah,
year old.
so yeah, there's a young adult group that meets. I'll have to look. I think it's the second Wednesday of the month or something like that, but I'll find out and I can get you that information. I don't know exact day, but
It's
a good
like
group of
this.
folks.
I think there's probably a group, but also it's like a round table like this where they meet.
Yeah, they have different discussions about things that are pertinent to that age group.
Sure.
Folks that are out in the workforce or in college.
Yeah.
So I'll get you that information. I don't remember exactly what day they meet.
Thank you. Yeah, and I'm really excited because Oscar is going to college in Kansas. He was able to plug in with Dr. Jeffrey Statland. So he is doing the Move Plus study and another study. I'm on the spot here, so I'm not remembering.
Good. That's good for him to get involved. And welcome. And like Debbie said, we're all just parents here trying to figure stuff out. So we're here to support each other. And we can help you. If we've gone through something ahead of you, reach out. We can maybe help you, or, we've done that. I reach out to people that are ahead of me and try to help out folks behind. So we're just all here to try and figure this stuff out together for our kids. So I'm glad you came. Welcome.
Wait.
Anyone else want to introduce themselves before we go?
Hey, this is Paul and Frankie here. He's had FSH. He's got diagnosed with FSHD2, so we know the rarity of that, right? And the challenges that comes with. He's involved in the MOVE study and all kinds of fundraising for the study here and the FSHD study with the 13 sites through the Richmond Hospital. Done a lot of fundraising for this program, right, that they have there. Just to that, I think it was Jessica, you were asking about the parent genetics. This group actually did on April 2022 an early onset parent roundtable, genetics of FSHD, and they did a really good job demonstrating that how does it pass from father and mother and all that stuff going in there. They broke it down to a really nice thing. So thank you, Allie, for now and all the future stuff done, plus those ones you've organized in the past. If you Google that one up, but it's a challenge when you figure it out. It's that blessing and the curse to figure it out. But like I said, we're going to fight for a cure, and we're getting there. And it's amazing to see the growth and the awareness, right? Just a huge awareness of it now, where it wasn't before. Got the folk like the Lululemon guy, and that contribution and that awareness and that kind of stuff really helps push and drive for a cure. And really think we'll be there. I think Frankie even recognizes some of the folks on this call here from the MOVE study in Richmond. So that was cool for him to come on. So thank you very, very much for putting this on. I think you did a fantastic job coordinating it down to a simple way to look at it. And the quiz at the end too, that got Frankie a little more involved than he normally is. So thank you for putting that on. I really appreciate that. That helped a whole lot with the simplicity of explaining what this is and the complexity of what it actually is.
Thank you, Paul. Anyone else want to go before we let Heloise go and Alice go?
Just, I had a quick question, Nellie. You mentioned avidity. It's for 16-year-olds now. She's on the list with her doctor, but how do we make sure that well, she's not 15 yet, and just in a couple of months. I mean, sorry, 16.
So you can reach out, if you go to clinicaltrials.gov, there'll be a contact there for you. And I would recommend that you talk to Debbie offline. She's going through this whole process as well. And she can probably give you some pointers that I can't, that's not just on the website, but I would start off at clinicaltrial.gov. And they have points of contact there for your closest CTRN, and then talk to Debbie.
And
I'm
no,
all in
yeah,
agreement with
anyone
you.
can be free to get in touch with me, but I was just Gabby, I was thinking I can't remember if you guys have done MOVE study, but if anyone has been in the MOVE study, that might be a good contact to talk first. Not everyone is it's not always the same person, but that you would be able to probably get information from that person. But also I'm happy to walk through things too.
Yeah, I got your information.
Yeah, so if you go to clinicaltrials.gov and you just put in FSHD 1 and then FSHD, it'll bring up all the clinical trials, and then they'll have points of contact at each CPRN. And then, you'll have to send your genetic testing and things like that, but that's the place to start. Anybody else want to introduce themselves, or any other last questions for Heloise and Alice? Jennifer, I put the young adult information in the chat. It meets the third Monday of each month at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. And if you go to fshdsociety.org and then go under gathering places, hit young adults, and then if you register for that, you just put in your email, they'll send you the link and a reminder every month and what the topic is going to be.
Perfect. Eloise, are you a part of that?
I'm actually talking with Zach right now, who's running it, about coming on for one of the meetings shortly. So, yeah.
Cool.
Heloise used to run a Gen Z of FSHD back when she was younger. That was a really good group. So they have two groups that are really good for kids. There's an early onset group, and then there's this young adults for the older folks. So if you want to get involved in either one of those, it's the same thing. Go on the gathering places, register, and then you'll get the Zoom links and the meeting information every month. Well, I want to be respectful of your time, Eloise. As always, you did an outstanding job. Thank you, Alice, for joining our community and fighting along with us. We appreciate you. And the Kahoot was great, and the presentation was great. I have heard these presentations at FSHD a lot of times, but this was a really good one, and I have to keep hearing it, or I'm like, oh, I can't. I don't have your brain, Eloise and Alice. I have to think about it long and hard. So I appreciate it. It was really easy to understand, and I think it was really, really positive experience to get the kids involved. And like you said, not only understanding the science of it, but given your personal perspective on how advocacy helped you and how you're conquering this and how you're going out and doing all these things in the world despite FSHD, I think is really important. I think it's really inspiring for the younger folks to see that you're doing all this stuff. So we appreciate you so much for giving us your time. And I know you're busy, 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 busy. So we appreciate it so much.
Well, thank you for saying that. And thank you all so much again for coming. It gives us so much inspiration to keep working not only on FSHD, but specifically peds. And I've popped both of our emails, Alice's and my email in the chat. So please do feel free to reach out with any more questions or concerns, or I'm happy to call if that would be easier, and talk more about the science or the research or my personal experience. And thank you again all so much for coming, and don't forget to keep up that hope and get involved. Roll up your sleeves.
Thank you so much. Good night, everybody. Thank you for coming. This was a great meeting.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.